The Silmarils, the three great jewels of the ancient days of the world. These beautiful and powerful objects of lore were the centerpiece of the epic drama that unfolded in the first age of Middle-earth. Today we look at the journeys of these three artifacts from their creation to their eventual fate. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings and all things Middle-earth, consider subscribing to the channel as we delve into the histories of Professor J.R.R. Tolkien's epic fantasy. We begin our tale in the distant past, before the sun and moon rose in the sky. In those days, the Noldren elves resided in the blessed lands of Valinor in the west, and dwelt in harmony with the Valar, the great ones of Arda. One of the eldest elves, named Finwe, married an elf maiden named Míriel. They had a son they named Finwe, who later was known as Feanor. When Feanor was born, he drained so much of his mother's life essence that she became a hollowed shell of her former self, and willingly gave up her life and faded away into the spiritual realm. Finwe, the first king of the Noldor, remarried and had several children, notably the valiant Fingolfin. As Feanor aged, he presented a great talent for craftsmanship. He also had a phenomenal mind, which was shown when he created the Elvish alphabet. Amongst his legendary creations, Feanor wrought the Palantir's Seeing Stones, as well as his greatest creations, the three Silmarils. In Feanor was the full extent of the greatness and creative potential of the Noldor, and he proved this point as he aged in the Blessed Realm. There was, however, a great foe that lingered in the shadows of the West, who learned of these three Silmarils and desired to obtain them for himself. This enemy was none other than the great Dark Lord of old, Melkor, the first and mightiest of the Valar. The Silmarils were imbued with the light of the two trees, which were the sources of light in those days of the earth. With the aid of the colossal spider Ungoliant, Melkor drained the light of the two trees, and Valinor was plunged into darkness. Melkor used this darkened state to infiltrate Feanor's abode in order to steal the jewels. Feanor was not present, but his father, Finwe, was. In an attempt to protect Feanor's treasure, Finwe was killed by Melkor, being the first elf slain in the Blessed Realm. Melkor then ransacked Feanor's stronghold and successfully stole the Silmarils. What transpired after would lead to the doom of the Noldor, their exile from Valinor, and the devastating wars of Beleriand in Middle-earth, when Feanor, along with his sons, made a vow, known as the Oath of Feanor, which stated that they would stop at nothing until the Silmarils were returned to the hands of their creator, Feanor. The oath drove Feanor to the brink of madness, and he, along with his sons, began a rebellion against the Valar, and were thus banished from those hallowed lands. Feanor went to the elven docks of Alqualonde to sail to Middle-earth in pursuit of the Dark Lord, which he named Morgoth, the Dark Enemy. Full of rage and vengeance for the death of his father, Feanor did not allow any to stand in his way, even his own kin. At Alqualonde, the tragic first kinslaying of the elves took place, when the Teleri elves refused to give Feanor's Noldor their ships to sail to Middle-earth. Feanor's elves boarded the boats by force, and a battle began. When Fingon, Fingolfin's son, arrived at the scene, he thought the Teleri had rebelled against his uncle Feanor, and so his Noldor joined in the fight and defeated the Teleri force. Feanor's followers then used the ships to cross the sea to Middle-earth, and once they made land, they burned the ships, for Feanor did not see the use in having his half-brother be a part of the journey. Due to the earth in those days being flat, the remaining Noldor in the west saw the ships being burned on the distant shores of Middle-earth, and they were forced to journey to Middle-earth by a different path, a much more difficult path, across the grinding ice of the Helcarax. Fingolfin decided to trudge forth on the long venture to Middle-earth because he willingly joined in Feanor's exile and did not want to face the wrath of the Valar if he were to return to Valinor. He also desired to avenge the death of his father Finwe, who perished at the hands of Morgoth. When Morgoth received word of Feanor's arrival in Middle-earth, the Dark Lord sent his army to attack Feanor, and a battle ensued known as the Battle Under the Stars. The Noldor fought mightily and defeated the Dark Host. Enraged, Feanor did not stop there, and he pursued the enemy further. With few elven warriors at his side, Feanor met up with his enemies and tirelessly slew them. Balrogs emerged, led by Gothmog, the greatest of the Balrogs, and Feanor met his match. Although Feanor was the most gifted elf in history, and his might in battle was second to none, the elf was mortally wounded by Gothmog. Feanor's sons drove off the remaining Balrogs and recovered their father, who cursed Morgoth one last time before perishing. The sons of Feanor, although having lost their king and father, continued their mission to avenge Feanor and recover his precious jewels. Maedhros, the eldest son of Feanor, was captured by Morgoth and hung by his right hand to the side of Thangorodrim, the mountain of Morgoth. Fingon, Maedhros' cousin, bravely flew atop Thorondor, the eagle, to the side of the mountain and freed Maedhros by severing his hand from the shackle. When the Noldor regrouped after Maedhros' rescue, Maedhros relinquished his kingship of the Noldor and it passed to Fingolfin, Feanor's half-brother. The Noldor successfully trapped Morgoth within his stronghold of Angband for over 4 centuries, and during this time, Morgoth built up his forces from within his dark domain, waiting for the right time to strike. After the Noldor had successfully laid siege to Angband for centuries, Morgoth's forces burst forth from Angband, and the Battle of Sudden Flame began. The battle drove the Noldor and their allies across the landscape, and rivers of fire burned the lands surrounding Angband. This allowed Morgoth's minions to roam the lands as they willed, and the northern stretches of Beleriand became a very dangerous place for the enemies of Morgoth. A few years after the siege of Angband was broken, the legendary human warrior Beren desired to wed the enchantingly beautiful elven maiden Lúthien, the daughter of King Thingol of Doriath. Thingol did not approve of this union and told Beren the only way he could marry his daughter was if he successfully retrieved a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Thus began the quest for the Silmaril, which saw Beren and his love Lúthien infiltrate Angband and take one of the great jewels. With the mystical abilities of the lovely Lúthien, both Beren and herself were disguised as fell creatures, which allowed the two to break into Angband unnoticed by the enemy. They made their way into Morgoth's throne room. Upon entering that malevolent pit, Lúthien became a mesmerizing dancer, and she sung a hypnotizing tune that caused the minions of Morgoth to fall asleep. Morgoth was also caught under her spell, falling into a deep sleep. Beren saw his opportunity, and he approached the Dark Lord's crown, and with his knife cut a jewel from it. In that moment, Beren saw that he had this one chance to not only take one, but all 3 jewels, and so he attempted to cut the others free from the crown. However, this was not meant to be, for the knife he used broke, and a splinter hit the face of Morgoth. This action broke the spell, and Morgoth and his chamber began to awake. Beren and Lúthien fled from the stronghold, but at the gate they were attacked by Morgoth's mighty werewolf servant, Carcharoth, the Red Maw. At last, before them, far away, they saw the glimmering wraith of day, the mighty archway of the gate, and there a horror new did wait. Upon the threshold, watchful, dire, his eyes new kindled with dull fire, towered Carcharoth, abiding doom. His jaws were gaping like a tomb. His teeth were bare, his tongue aflame. Aroused he watched, that no one came, no flitting shade nor hunted shape, seeking from Angband to escape. Now past that guard, what guile or might could thrust from death into the light? Lúthien was spent, and she had not time nor strength to quell the wolf. But Beren strode forth before her, and in his right hand he held aloft the Silmaril. Carcharoth halted, and for a moment was afraid. "Get you gone and fly," cried Beren, "for here is a fire that shall consume you, and all evil things." And he thrust the Silmaril before the eyes of the wolf. Beren raised the single jewel he had retrieved from the Dark Lord's crown and held it up in the face of the monster. The wolf was stopped for a moment, but the urge to feed was strong in the beast, and thus he bit the hand of Beren clean off his wrist and devoured the hand holding the jewel. Carcharoth was filled with intense agony as the Silmaril burned his innards. The beast went forth into the wild, running swiftly, engrossed in pain. As Beren and Lúthien emerged from Angband, Thorondor was flying overhead and saved the two from the dangers that pursued them. The eagle took them back to Doriath, and Beren was revived back to health. After learning of the harrowing adventure the two had just endured, Thingol allowed Beren to wed Lúthien. Carcharoth, however, had made his way into the realm of Doriath, and Thingol, along with Beren and other elves, hunted down the beast with the help of the legendary Huan. Carcharoth was discovered, and Huan ravaged the hellacious beast, but was greatly wounded and died from the clash. Beren was also gravely hurt, once again by Carcharoth, and the man of legend died from his wounds. At long last, one of the Silmarils was finally taken from the enemy. The Silmaril was cut from Carcharoth's belly and returned to Doriath. Although Thingol had possession of the Silmaril, the tragedies the jewel would bring about were not over. Years later, after the fall of Turin Turambar and the dragon Glaurung, Hurin, Turin's father, entered Doriath and gave the dwarven treasure, the Nauglamír, a radiant necklace, to King Thingol. Hurin had retrieved the necklace from Nargothrond and took it to Thingol to thank him for raising his son while he was imprisoned in Angband. At this time, Thingol desired to join the Silmaril he possessed with the beautiful necklace. Calling on the craftsmanship of the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, the great jewel was placed on the necklace, creating the most beautiful artifact of the ancient days. After the Nauglamír was greatly upgraded with its new jewel, the dwarves envied it and demanded that Thingol give the necklace back to the dwarves who had made it. After Thingol refused, the dwarves turned on the ancient elven king and slew him. After numerous skirmishes between the dwarves and elves, the Nauglamír eventually ended up in the hands of the dwarves. As they were taking it back to the Blue Mountains, Beren, who had been given another life by the Valar, crushed the dwarves with the aid of green elves, and Beren took the necklace to his love Lúthien, who wore the necklace the remainder of her days in Middle-earth. Beren and Lúthien lived together for years until the two eventually died naturally. Their son Dior had returned to his kin's domain of Doriath to rebuild that elven realm after the treachery of the dwarves. Upon his mother's passing, the Nauglamír was sent to Dior. At this time, the sons of Feanor learned of the Silmaril's location and went to Doriath to finally take back one of their father's treasures. The second kinslaying took place when the Feanorians utterly destroyed the ancient elven realm of Doriath and killed Dior, attempting to take the jewel. The necklace, however, had been taken by Dior's daughter, Elwing, to the mouths of Sirion, and thus the sons of Feanor failed to retrieve the jewel. Years passed, and the survivors of the fall of Doriath, along with other elven refugees, gathered at the mouths of Sirion. The third and final kinslaying took place there, when the Feanorians ravaged the area and closed in on Elwing. Elwing made her way to a cliff overlooking the sea, and before the sons reached her, she jumped from the cliff, falling into the great sea. The Silmaril, however, was not lost, for Ulmo, the great Vala of the sea, made Elwing into the likeness of a white bird, and she flew with the jewel to her love Eärendil aboard his boat, seeking the Undying Lands. With the Silmaril in their possession, the two made it all the way to Valinor, where they pleaded for the help of the Valar to come to the elves' aid in Middle-earth and finally put an end to the darkness of Morgoth. The Silmaril of Beren and Lúthien had made its way to their granddaughter's husband, Eärendil, who wore the jewel on his brow as he led the forces of Valinor to Middle-earth to wage a final battle against Morgoth. The enemy was indeed crushed, and the 2 remaining jewels on Morgoth's crown taken from the Dark Lord. At this time, only Maedhros and Maglor remained of Feanor's children, and the 2 brothers stole the 2 remaining Silmarils after the War of Wrath, each taking one, due to their lifelong rebellion against the Valar and the oath of their father, which led them to killing their own kin for many years. They were incapable of holding the jewels, for the great stones burned their hands when they held them. Maedhros was driven mad by the Silmaril he took, and journeyed alone far into the wild, and eventually threw himself into a chasm in the ground, along with the Silmaril he carried. Maglor's fate is not entirely known. He made his way to the western shores of Middle-earth, where he threw the jewel he carried into the sea. He remained there for the rest of his days, singing songs of lamentation for the evils he had done in his life. The 3rd and final Silmaril, which had been cut from Morgoth's crown by Beren, remained with the blessed mariner, Eärendil, who, after the ending of the First Age, sailed upon his flying boat into the heavens where the Silmaril became a star. This same star would lead Eärendil's son Elros to the island of Andor, where the kingdom of Númenor would be established. One jewel plummeted into the heart of the earth, one jewel swallowed up by the sea, and one jewel set in the sky to be a light for all. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and all things Middle-earth, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.